Welcome back, everybody, to Weekly Briefing. Now it is time for your favorite part of the show, the Political Roundtable. Well, President Donald Trump signed an executive order requiring federal agencies to collaborate with the Department of Government Efficiency. Elon Musk, the leader of DOGE, was present in the Oval Office during the signing. Trump highlighted the significance of the department's mission before having Musk talk to reporters about the waste, fraud, and abuse his team has uncovered. Take a listen.
If you look at, say Treasury, for example, basic controls that should be in place, that are in place in any company, such as making sure that any given payment has a payment categorization code, that there is a comment field that describes the payment, and that if a payment is on the do not pay list, that you don't actually pay it. None of those things are true currently. So the reason that departments can't pass audits is because the payments don't have a categorization code. When you understand that really everything is geared towards complaint minimization, so then you understand the motivations. So if people receive money, they don't complain, obviously. But if people don't receive money, they do complain. And the fraudsters complain the loudest and the fastest. So then when you understand that, then it makes sense.
So, Irish, is very interesting. A lot of Democrats are complaining, as Elon notes there. It's very interesting. When I watch legacy media, mainstream media, they always seem to start off by saying, Elon Musk, the unelected, unaccountable billionaire. And so now he's got an executive order having DOGE team leads at each agency. So this unelected, unaccountable billionaire now is appointing people to essentially go into each of these departments. Is this just going to light Democrats' hair on fire?
Well, it's certainly prompting some criticism, as we saw at this week's DOGE congressional hearing this week, where Democrats really called him out for, calling him President Musk, etc. But we have heard both the White House and President Trump responding to those concerns inside that Oval Office. And Trump says he trusts Elon Musk, saying that he has nothing to gain from it. And during the White House press briefing this week, Caroline Leavitt emphasized that Elon Musk, what he's doing, including the work by DOGE, has been very transparent, actually. They've been publishing receipts and what specific agency they're targeting on their social media accounts, on their own websites, where the American public can actually see what exactly they're trying to get to. And Elon Musk himself actually responded to those concerns by saying that, the public can judge by seeing if anything that he's doing actually has a conflict of interest with his own businesses. So, of course, we're seeing a larger role now by Musk, not only when it comes to slashing what they're calling fraud and waste, but now, like you said, having him to appoint people potentially into these government agencies, having them to report a monthly hiring report to DOGE to talk about, what government workforce they're slashing and how they're filling the position. So it is an expanded role for sure.
An expanded role for Elon Musk, and talking about hiring also means talking about firing. And one of these executive orders that Mr. Trump, speaking of firing, who used to say, "You're fired," that was one of his big watchwords, he signed an executive order which orders agency heads to, quote, promptly undertake preparations to initiate large-scale reductions in force, Lee, consistent with applicable law. The phrase is RIF, and government employees know that RIF is translated as "you're fired," right?
Yeah, and I think what Donald Trump is doing is he's created a magic moment to make the government more efficient. And let's remember that the same people who are outraged about the efforts of DOGE are the same politicians who wanted to hire an additional 87,000 IRS agents to audit middle-class Americans. So I just think that, again, how insulting is it to the American people for Donald Trump and Elon Musk, as they want to get under the hood, make government more efficient? These are our tax dollars at the end of the day. And, if you think about the average American over the course of our lifetimes, each person will pay about $500,000 in taxes. What we've learned is that's nothing more than a rounding error in some of these federal programs that are rife with waste, fraud, and abuse. And on Capitol Hill this week, they said that since 2003, they had uncovered $2.7 trillion in fraudulent and improper payments. I think what else is exciting about this movement, and we'll give credit to the president on this, it has really emboldened the states. many state governments and leaders in state capitals are forming their own DOGE caucuses.
Many Doges?
That's right, mini Doges, everywhere from red states like Missouri and Georgia to folks in blue states like Illinois and Maryland. We're seeing these DOGE efforts crop up around the country. And so it truly is a magic moment to make all levels of government more efficient.
Well, as Everett Dirksen once said, $1 billion here, $1 million there, and pretty soon you're talking about real money. Speaking of which, taxpayer money, Marjorie Taylor Greene convened the first meeting of the DOGE subcommittee in Congress. Marjorie Taylor Greene, a member of Congress from Georgia, she said, quote, "The federal government's income is the American people's hard-earned tax dollars, their literal blood, sweat, and tears." What do you make of that, AJ, at the first meeting of the Congressional Subcommittee, DOGE Subcommittee?
I'm so proud of Republicans for standing strong on this and for defending Elon Musk and defending DOGE. That committee hearing showed how out of touch Democrats are and that they still don't understand why they lost this election. Donald Trump ran on this platform of cutting spending, cutting fraud. Americans understand that that's a large cause of the inflation. That's a large reason why their eggs cost so much and why they're struggling to pay their bills. So cutting their spending, he's doing it for them. He's doing it for the taxpayer. And one of the things that Elon is cutting is $900 million for the Department of Education Sciences, which basically has been studying American students for years and years. And what are the results of this? That's the point of DOGE. You're spending $900 million of a $268 billion budget that the Department of Education gets. Where are the results? Well, if there are no results, there's no more money.
That's what a lot of people are wondering right now. Anyway, meanwhile, this week, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth made his first visit to the NATO headquarters in Brussels. During the Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting, Hegseth said that a return to Ukraine's 2014 borders isn't feasible and that they need to have achievable goals in order to end the war. Take a listen.
We will only end this devastating war and establish a durable peace by coupling Allied strength with a realistic assessment of the battlefield. We want, like you, a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine. But we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective. Chasing this illusionary goal will only prolong the war and cause more suffering.
Lee, Hegseth also said coupling Allied strength with a realistic assessment of the battlefield is what this sort of peace agreement should look like. Translate that for us into English.
Well, I think clearly we've got the adults back in charge. And we talked about this recently, but it's all about achieving peace through strength for the Trump administration and with Pete Hegseth. And this is something that President Trump campaigned on extensively. This is why he won the popular vote. And this is something that Pete Hegseth talked a lot about in his confirmation hearings. And so I think that's what we're seeing here on the international stage from the Trump administration. I would also add that, it's encouraging to see that he's out there mixing it up, doing PT with the troops. And, the Army is also cutting ads showing soldiers lifting weights and talking about being more difficult to kill. There's really there's a new sheriff in town, I think, on the global stage.
Be all you can be. Iris, I'm wondering, though, should Mr. Zelensky be a little bit nervous after what Mr. Hegseth said?
I think so, especially actually after President Trump agreed with Defense Secretary Peter Hegseth actually yesterday, this week during the swearing-in ceremony for Gabbard. He said that he too thinks that it's not practical for Ukraine to regain its 2014 borders and that it's not realistic for it to join NATO. So for Ukraine, it means that the U.S. is setting the terms for a potential settlement of the war. This week Trump called both Zelensky and Putin, and that call with Putin actually also signifies a major shift from the previous administration's approach to the war. We saw the Biden administration actually try not to give Putin, the spotlight by not trying to call him and not initiating direct contact when it directly comes to the war negotiations. But now President Trump both making the calls and now saying that they're agreeing to visit each other's countries, potentially meeting first in Saudi Arabia initiating the direct contact and having Russia directly involved in now a start of negotiations to a deal means a major step forward for the U.S. But to Zelensky, though, there are concerns both by Ukraine and by European nations if that means that Ukraine is not being included as much as a main participant in this negotiation.
AJ, will Russia win the peace, do you suppose?
I think the important part of peace is that you have to negotiate. Both sides have to give up something, and I think Trump and Pete Hegseth will try to be fair to both. But we have to keep Americans first. We can't keep spending this money. $180 billion is enough. George Washington talked about us not entangling ourselves in forever wars, and that's what this would become if Trump wasn't serious about reaching peace and a peace agreement between the two countries.
There is leverage, certainly with the United States. That is certainly true. So we shall see. Meanwhile, when we return, the Senate confirmed Tulsi Gabbard as the new Director of National Intelligence. Find out more about the vote right after the break. Don't touch that dial. Welcome back, everybody, to Weekly Briefing. Well, the Senate voted 52-48 to confirm former Hawaii Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard as the new Director of National Intelligence. Senator Mitch McConnell was the only Republican to vote against her confirmation, expressing concerns about her trustworthiness. However, during her confirmation hearing, Gabbard reassured lawmakers of her commitment to restoring trust within the intelligence community. Take a look.
President Trump's re-election is a clear mandate from the American people to break this cycle of failure, end the weaponization and politicization of the intelligence community, and begin to restore trust in those who've been charged with the critical task of securing our nation. If confirmed as DNI, I will do my very best to fulfill this mandate and bring leadership to the intelligence community with a laser-like focus on our essential mission: ensuring the safety, security, and freedom of the American people.
So, AJ, what's really interesting here is the mainstream media has been writing the obituary for her nomination for many weeks now. Suddenly, everything turned around and she got through. What happened? What changed?
The American people are putting trust in who Trump wants to put in these positions. She'll be managing a massive budget, and she'll be advising President Trump directly on national security issues. And people trust her because she thinks for herself. She has a sense of justice and a moral compass. What's interesting to me is the left has not, the way that they propped up Kamala, a woman of color, all these different things. With Tulsi, it doesn't matter that she is breaking barriers with this position. All they care about is that she doesn't listen to the deep state and that she thinks for herself. And they are afraid of the fact that she will advise the president in a way that focuses on what puts American interests first.
Lee, it's interesting because Intelligence Chair Tom Cotton even enlisted the efforts of former Senator Kyrsten Sinema to persuade Indiana's Todd Young and Maine's Susan Collins to support Tulsi Gabbard. But I'm wondering, someone not mentioned here is Charlie Kirk and Turning Point and the word primary. Did that have an impact, do you suppose?
Well, I think what's interesting about folks who were lobbying for her to be confirmed versus folks that were questioning her loyalties to the United States, there was really some cognitive dissonance there. Of course, Tulsi Gabbard has served in the U.S. Army Reserve and has been repeatedly promoted, achieving most recently the title or the rank of lieutenant colonel. And so I think those that are questioning her loyalties to the U.S. Should take a look at her military service and that career. The other thing that's fascinating about this confirmation is that she is now overseeing the very agencies that were, in her words, weaponized against her. The Biden administration put her on a watch list, a TSA watch list. Some say that it was due to her taking down Kamala Harris on a Democratic primary debate stage. But I think for President Trump, as he watches many members of the establishment of Washington have some lose some sleep over this confirmation, I think for him it confirms that he made the right decision. I mean, President Trump obviously wants to be an agent of change here and shake up the Washington establishment. And the last thing I would say about Tulsi Gabbard is, she is part of this new wave, a new generation of leadership. Born in the early 80s, she's another millennial member of the Trump administration.
Here come the millennials. I'm hearing that refrain now. Iris, it's interesting because Tulsi Gabbard was questioned in her hearings for her support. She said Edward Snowden was a hero. Also, she seemed to flip-flop on support or lack of support for Section 702 of FISA, which is this ability to spy on Americans. Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act supposedly limits the government spying on foreigners, but there's a loophole in there, and she appeared to flip-flop. But that didn't seem to make a difference in the end, right?
Well, that was definitely one of the major controversies for her nomination. She did have to make commitments about both data privacy and the ability that she stood for. Actually, she did not back down on her and a reluctance to call Snowden a traitor. She still emphasized that she thinks there needs to be a way for people to report on the government and make such allegations. But she did have to make commitment about about privacy and such that security for American people as well. But the point is, as we just discussed here, shows that actually by President Trump's authority, by him, naming Tulsi Gabbard as his pick for DNI, it shows not only to Republicans, but also just shows the whole Congress that he wants this person confirmed. And that, given the majority in the Senate that Republicans now have, and President Trump's mandate that, that he kept emphasizing by winning the election and the popular vote, it's just ultimately, not inevitable for Tulsi Gabbard to get confirmed. And actually, it's kind of rare, too, for any nominees to not get confirmed. So I wouldn't be surprised by it either.
Well, it was an interesting vote to watch and an interesting process. Meanwhile, DOGE uncovered that the Federal Emergency Management Agency spent $59 million on luxury hotels for migrants last week alone. In response, President Donald Trump took to Truth Social, calling for the termination of FEMA due to its alleged mismanagement of funds. Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, echoed Trump's sentiment, agreeing that FEMA should be dismantled and that states should have the ability to provide disaster relief directly. Take a listen.
I would say, yes, get rid of FEMA the way it exists today. We still need the resources and the funds and the finances to go to people that have these types of disasters like Hurricane Helene and the fires in California. But you need to let the local officials make the decisions on how that is deployed so it can be deployed much quicker, and we don't need this bureaucracy that's picking and choosing winners.
Lee, it's interesting. Elon Musk wrote on Twitter, quote, sending this money violated the law and is in gross insubordination to the president's executive order. Will it make any difference if they give this money, this responsibility to the states, do you suppose?
Well, I think the states could do a much more efficient job of managing these funds. Of course, each state understands its own needs. The state governments are closer to the taxpayer. But I've got to say, it's refreshing to see Elon Musk and his team uncover these schemes that are taking place, as if we needed any more evidence of a deep state existing. You've got these Biden administration holdovers who are transferring huge sums of our taxpayer dollars for things like these hotel reservations in New York City. It is rich when Chuck Schumer claims that Elon Musk is operating a shadow government through his DOGE efforts. I mean, you've got to look in the mirror, Chuck. This is exactly what is taking place here with these deep state actors. And it was also, I think, interesting this week, or refreshing, when Lee Zeldin recorded a video talking about Biden officials being caught red-handed, saying that they were throwing gold bars off the Titanic, parking billions of dollars with NGOs and with a specific financial institution. Again, another example of these deep state actors and really proving the point and the need for DOGE.
DOGE, a need for DOGE. Iris, I want to play this soundbite because this is very interesting. This is Karine Jean-Pierre in October saying that FEMA was not giving funding to house migrants in hotels. Let's hear about that.
The Biden administration of using FEMA funding to support undocumented migrants. How is the White House responding to that?
I mean, it's just categorically false. It is not true.
Categorically false and not true that the Biden administration was using FEMA money for hotel rooms for migrants. What do you think about that?
There is actually some caveat here, though. That money, at least the one that Elon Musk was supposedly referring to, is actually not directly given by FEMA. Those funds come from the DHS, but FEMA is the one managing it, and is actually under a program called Shelter and Services Program, which was, tapped by Trump back in 2019. In 2021, he said, no, we're not doing this anymore. States should, afford the funding, the food and services for migrants. But now Biden, during his administration, really increased the funding for this program to house and, of course, take care of these illegal immigrants. So we are now seeing this controversy over both where this fund actually comes from and who gave the green light to distribute them. And that's what we're seeing, potentially the 4 FEMA employees being fired this week for, what they say, giving green light to this without upper management. So it could be something more to dig into here.
AJ, what do you make of all this?
It's unfortunate that the way our country is managing money has just been so irresponsible. When you give agencies hundreds of millions and sometimes billions of dollars, and they're not able to respond quickly to a disaster when that's your sole purpose, it's not to house migrants, it's not to spend money on all these other things. Your sole purpose is to respond to emergencies that Americans face, and you are not doing that properly. And so the outrage is totally, it's warranted, and all this money that's going to places it shouldn't be should be stopped immediately.
Warranted and outraged. Indeed. We shall see how that turns out. Meanwhile, panelists, we have about a minute left. It is time for our crystal ball question. Panelists, the hosts of The View made fun of Elon Musk's son's name, which is X. Panelists, gaze into your crystal ball and tell me if they would stoop so low as to making fun of a young child for his unusual name, who do you think they will make fun of next? Iris.
I think they actually might joke about the name DOGE. To me personally, that's been quite an interesting name throughout this whole time. I mean, I was just thinking about today, like who came up with it? It's a good name, and that is stood for the appropriate term, Department of Government Efficiency, but also it just, makes people feel a sense of humor by just thinking about it. So it could be made fun of, or you can praise it however you want.
DOGE is the next victim. Lee, what do you say?
Yeah, it's sad they're going after little X. I think Vice President J.D. Vance, he's got 3 cute little kids. They might be next. I mean, The View is pretty heartless. I wouldn't put it past them.
Who knows? AJ?
I immediately thought about Kai Trump and Barron Trump. Because they have the name Trump, they're immediately going to be a target. And they're also becoming very popular on social media. And the left doesn't want the next generation to see Trump as a positive thing. So unfortunately, I think they'll be next.
Who knows? We shall see. It'll be interesting to watch. That is all the time we have, panelists. Thank you